American 191 Heavy, we're losing power on the left engine. We're going down. The frantic voice of Captain Walter Lux crackled through the radio waves on that fateful May 25, 1979, as American Airlines Flight 191 began its deadly descent into one of aviation's most horrific disasters. In the span of just 31 seconds, what started as a routine departure from Chicago O'Hare International Airport would transform into a nightmare that would forever change how we understand aircraft design and maintenance procedures. The Douglas DC-10, a marvel of modern engineering carrying 271 souls aboard, was about to become the deadliest aviation accident in United States history, its massive frame hurtling toward Earth with the devastating force of a falling skyscraper. This is the story of those terrifying final moments, where human error, mechanical failure, and tragic circumstance converged in the most catastrophic way possible. The morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling tarmac of Chicago O'Hare as Flight 191 prepared for what should have been an unremarkable journey to Los Angeles International Airport. The Douglas DC-10, registration number N110AA, stood gleaming on the runway, its three engines promising the power and reliability that had made it one of the most trusted aircraft in commercial aviation. Captain Walter Lux, a veteran pilot with over 22,000 flight hours, conducted his final pre-flight checks alongside First Officer James Dillard, whose 9,075 hours of experience complemented the captain's seasoned expertise. Flight engineer Alfred Udovich, responsible for monitoring the complex systems that kept the massive aircraft operational, completed the experienced crew that passengers trusted with their lives. The DC-10 had been in service since 1972 and had earned a reputation as a workhorse of the skies, capable of carrying up to 380 passengers across vast distances with remarkable efficiency. American Airlines had invested heavily in this fleet, and Flight 191 represented everything the airline stood for: punctuality, safety, and comfort. The 258 passengers settling into their seats that morning included families heading to California for Memorial Day weekend, business travelers pursuing important deals, and individuals simply seeking new adventures in the Golden State. Among them sat children clutching favorite toys, couples planning romantic getaways, and elderly passengers visiting grandchildren they hadn't seen in months. None of them could have imagined that they were boarding what would become a flying tomb, their final destination, not the sunny beaches of Los Angeles, but a fiery crater in an Illinois field. As Flight 191 received clearance for takeoff on runway 32. Right, the atmosphere in the cockpit remained professional and calm. Captain Lux applied power to the three Pratt & Whitney engines, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as the massive aircraft began its roll down the concrete strip. The DC-10 responded beautifully to his touch, gathering speed with the steady determination that had made it such a popular choice among airlines worldwide. First Officer Dillard monitored the instruments, calling out critical speeds as they approached the point of no return. The aircraft's weight of 379,000 pounds required every foot of the 10,000-foot runway to achieve the necessary velocity for flight, and the engines roared with mechanical precision as they converted thousands of gallons of jet fuel into pure thrust. Flight engineer Udovich watched his panel of gauges and switches, ensuring that all systems operated within normal parameters as they accelerated toward their destiny with disaster. The passengers felt the familiar sensation of being pressed back into their seats as the aircraft gained momentum, many of them gazing out windows at the Chicago skyline shrinking below. Some were already planning their activities in Los Angeles, others were settling in for the long flight with books and magazines, and a few were nervously gripping armrests as they experienced the anxiety that comes with leaving solid ground behind. The DC-10 reached its rotation speed of 159 knots, and Captain Lux pulled back on the controls, lifting the nose skyward as the main landing gear broke contact with the runway surface. Everything changed in an instant at 3:02 p.m. Central Daylight Time. As Flight 191 climbed through 325 feet above ground level, a catastrophic failure occurred that would seal the fate of everyone aboard. The left engine, weighing over 4,600 pounds, suddenly separated from the wing in a violent explosion of metal and fire. The massive General Electric CF6 power plant, designed to remain attached under the most extreme conditions, tore away from its mounting points with the force of a controlled demolition. The engine didn't simply fall away cleanly. It flipped up and over the wing, severing critical hydraulic lines and electrical systems that controlled the aircraft's most vital functions. Captain Lux felt the aircraft lurch violently to the left as the asymmetric thrust from the remaining engines created an uncontrollable yaw. The loss of the engine meant more than just reduced power. It meant the destruction of the very systems that allowed the crew to maintain control of their aircraft. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the wing like arterial blood from a massive wound, and electrical systems began failing in cascade fashion as damaged wiring sparked and died. The passengers experienced a moment of confusion as the aircraft shuddered and tilted, some thinking they had hit turbulence, others immediately sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. Flight attendants, trained for emergencies but never expecting to face one of this magnitude, began preparing for procedures they had practiced but hoped never to use. The DC-10's design included multiple redundant systems specifically to prevent total control loss, but the manner of the engine separation had created a perfect storm of failures. As the engine departed the aircraft, it damaged the leading edge slats on the left wing, causing them to retract when they should have remained extended. This asymmetric configuration created a deadly aerodynamic imbalance that made the aircraft nearly impossible to control at low altitude and speed. Captain Lux and First Officer Dillard found themselves fighting an aircraft that no longer responded to their inputs in predictable ways. The flight controls felt sluggish and unresponsive, and warning lights began illuminating across the instrument panel like a deadly Christmas display. The stick shaker activated, warning of an impending stall. But the crew had no way of knowing that their aircraft was experiencing a phenomenon that had never been adequately tested or understood. The left wing was losing lift at a catastrophic rate, while the right wing continued to generate lift normally, creating a rolling moment that would prove impossible to counter. Flight engineer Udovich frantically worked through emergency checklists, but the systems he needed to consult were no longer functioning properly, their indicators dark or providing false information. As Flight 191 continued its climb, reaching a maximum altitude of only 325 feet, the aerodynamic forces acting upon the damaged aircraft became increasingly unmanageable. The loss of hydraulic pressure meant that the flight controls required enormous physical strength to operate, and even then, the responses were unpredictable and delayed. Captain Lux, with over 2 decades of flying experience, had never encountered a situation like this, where multiple system failures combined with aerodynamic changes to create an unsolvable puzzle. The aircraft began rolling to the left, despite the crew's desperate attempts to maintain wings-level flight. The passengers could feel the unnatural motion, the way the aircraft seemed to be fighting itself, and many began to realize that they were experiencing something far more serious than routine turbulence. Some clutched the hands of loved ones, others began quiet prayers, and a few started making peace with the possibility that they might not reach their destination. The flight attendants, trained to maintain calm in emergency situations, began preparing the cabin for a possible emergency landing, though they had no way of knowing that their aircraft was already beyond salvation. The physics of flight became Flight 191's enemy as the damaged DC-10 approached its critical angle of attack. With the left wing slats retracted and generating significantly less lift than the right wing, the aircraft began to stall asymmetrically, a condition that creates an unrecoverable departure from controlled flight. Captain Lux pulled back on the controls, attempting to maintain altitude, but this action only worsened the aerodynamic situation by increasing the angle of attack beyond the wing's capability to generate lift. The aircraft's nose rose higher, bleeding off precious airspeed, while the damaged left wing reached its stall point first. The result was a snap roll to the left that no amount of pilot skill or experience could prevent or recover from. In the cockpit, warning systems screamed alerts that the crew could barely hear over the cacophony of wind noise from the damaged wing and the roar of the 2 remaining engines operating at maximum power. First Officer Dillard called out airspeed and altitude readings, his voice remaining professional even as he watched the instruments tell a story of impending doom. The ground, which had seemed safely distant just moments before, began rushing up toward them with terrifying speed as the aircraft entered an uncontrolled descent. The final moments of Flight 191 unfolded with the inexorable certainty of a Greek tragedy, each second bringing the doomed aircraft closer to its appointment with Earth. The DC-10 rolled inverted, its massive bulk blocking out the sun for anyone who might have been watching from below, before entering a steep nose-down attitude that no pilot could recover from at such low altitude. Captain Lux and his crew fought the controls until the very end, their training and instincts compelling them to never give up, even when faced with an impossible situation. The passengers experienced the terror of knowing that death was approaching, some screaming, others maintaining an eerie calm, many simply holding on to whatever or whoever was closest to them. The aircraft's altitude decreased from 325 feet to ground level in a matter of seconds, the margin for error eliminated by the combination of mechanical failure, aerodynamic forces, and the unforgiving laws of physics. At 3:04 p.m., just 31 seconds after the engine separation, American Airlines Flight 191 impacted an open field near Toohey Avenue, approximately 4,600 feet northwest of the departure runway. The impact occurred at a speed exceeding 140 knots, with the aircraft inverted and nose down at an angle that ensured no survival was possible. The crash of Flight 191 created a fireball visible for miles, sending a column of black smoke into the clear afternoon sky that served as a beacon for emergency responders racing to the scene. The impact was so violent that the aircraft was completely destroyed, its aluminum structure no match for the forces involved in the collision with Earth. The jet fuel aboard ignited immediately, creating temperatures that exceeded 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and ensuring that little remained of the once magnificent flying machine. All 271 people aboard perished instantly, their lives ended not by pilot error or weather, but by a maintenance procedure that had been performed incorrectly weeks before the fatal flight. 2 people on the ground were also killed when the aircraft struck a mobile home, bringing the total death toll to 273 and making this disaster the deadliest aviation accident in American history at that time. Emergency responders arriving at the scene found little that resembled an aircraft, just scattered debris and a crater surrounded by burning wreckage that would smolder for hours. The investigation into Flight 191's crash revealed a chain of errors that began long before the aircraft ever left the gate that tragic day. Maintenance records showed that 3 weeks prior to the accident, American Airlines mechanics had removed the left engine for inspection using a procedure that differed from the manufacturer's recommendations. Instead of removing the engine and pylon separately, as specified by Douglas Aircraft Company, the airline's maintenance manual called for removing both components as a single unit using a forklift. This non-standard procedure, while appearing more efficient, placed stresses on the engine mounting points that they were never designed to handle. Over the course of several maintenance cycles, these repeated stresses created hairline cracks in the mounting structure that went undetected by visual inspection methods available at the time. The crack that ultimately caused the engine separation began small and invisible, growing slowly with each flight cycle until it reached a critical length that could no longer withstand the normal forces of flight. On the day of the accident, as Flight 191 rotated for takeoff, the final stress loads exceeded the weakened mounting point's capacity, causing the catastrophic separation that doomed the flight. The Federal Aviation Administration's response to the Flight 191 disaster was swift and comprehensive, leading to some of the most significant safety improvements in aviation history. The entire DC-10 fleet was temporarily grounded while investigators examined engine mounting procedures and structural integrity across all aircraft of this type. New inspection protocols were developed that could detect the types of cracks that had caused the accident, using advanced techniques like electromagnetic testing that could find flaws invisible to the human eye. Maintenance procedures were revised to eliminate the dangerous practices that had contributed to the accident, and the manufacturer's recommendations became mandatory rather than optional. The investigation also revealed critical gaps in understanding how aircraft behave when multiple systems fail simultaneously, leading to enhanced pilot training programs that better prepared crews for complex emergency scenarios. The asymmetric stall characteristics that made Flight 191 unrecoverable became the subject of extensive research and testing, resulting in improved aircraft designs that are more forgiving of partial system failures. The human cost of Flight 191 extended far beyond the 273 lives lost in the accident itself, touching families, friends, and entire communities with grief that would last for decades. Among the victims were parents who would never see their children graduate, children who would never experience the love of their mothers and fathers, and spouses whose life partners were taken away in an instant. The crew members who died that day were experienced professionals who had dedicated their careers to safely transporting passengers, their final act being a desperate attempt to save lives even when their own deaths became inevitable. Captain Lux left behind a family who remembered him as a devoted husband and father, whose love of flying was matched only by his commitment to safety. First Officer Dillard was described by colleagues as a meticulous aviator who approached every flight with the professionalism that defines the best in commercial aviation. Flight engineer Udovich was known for his encyclopedic knowledge of aircraft systems and his calm demeanor under pressure, qualities that served him well until that final, impossible challenge. The passengers aboard Flight 191 represented a cross-section of American society, each with dreams, aspirations, and people who loved them waiting at destinations they would never reach. Families planning vacations found their joy transformed into unspeakable tragedy. Business travelers pursuing success had their ambitions ended in an instant, and individuals seeking new beginnings discovered instead a final destination none had chosen. The youngest victim was just 6 months old, while the oldest was 82 years of age, spanning generations and representing the democratic nature of air travel, where age, wealth, and status provide no protection against mechanical failure and human error. Memorial services held in the days following the accident brought together thousands of mourners, many of whom had never met, but were united in their grief and their determination to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. The legacy of American Airlines Flight 191 lives on in every safety improvement implemented since that terrible day in May 1979. The accident led to the development of enhanced ground proximity warning systems that alert crews when aircraft are in dangerous attitudes close to the ground. Improved engine mounting designs ensure that even catastrophic engine failures cannot compromise flight control systems to the extent experienced by Flight 191. Training programs now include scenarios that help pilots understand and respond to the complex interactions between different aircraft systems, preparing them for emergencies that previous generations of aviators had never imagined. The investigation techniques developed in response to this accident have been applied to subsequent incidents, helping investigators understand not just what happened, but why it happened and how to prevent similar occurrences. Modern aircraft benefit from the painful lessons learned from Flight 191, incorporating multiple levels of redundancy that make it virtually impossible for a single mechanical failure to result in total loss of control. Computer systems now monitor engine health continuously, providing early warnings of potential problems before they become catastrophic. Maintenance procedures include multiple verification steps and inspection requirements that would have caught the crack that doomed Flight 191 long before it reached critical dimensions. The regulatory environment has evolved to ensure that manufacturer recommendations are treated as mandatory requirements rather than suggestions, eliminating the ambiguity that contributed to the non-standard maintenance practices that caused this accident. Today, as we remember the 273 souls lost aboard Flight 191, we honor their memory by acknowledging that their deaths were not in vain if they prevent future tragedies. Every passenger who boards a commercial aircraft today benefits from the safety improvements that emerged from this disaster, flying on machines that are safer and more reliable than any previous generation could have imagined. The pilots who guide these aircraft have been trained using knowledge gained from analyzing what went wrong on that spring afternoon in Chicago, and the maintenance technicians who keep them airworthy follow procedures refined by understanding the consequences of shortcuts and assumptions. Flight 191's final contribution to aviation was not the safe delivery of its passengers to Los Angeles, but the delivery of knowledge that would protect countless future passengers from experiencing similar fates. If you've been touched by this story of human tragedy and technological failure, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel, where we continue to explore the lessons that aviation disasters teach us about the importance of safety, vigilance, and respect for the awesome forces we harness in the pursuit of flight. Share this video with others who understand that behind every safety regulation and every maintenance procedure lies a story of real people whose lives were changed forever by the unforgiving nature of mechanical failure and human error. Remember that every time you board an aircraft, you are benefiting from the sacrifice of those who came before, whose deaths served as stepping stones toward the safer skies we enjoy today.